members of the Students' Federation of India, members and sympathizers of SAHMAT, students of JNU, friends. I am in a particularly embarrassing moment because I've just been told that I could speak for as much as I like, which I think is a very difficult thing to decide. So I'll try to be as brief as I can on a subject on which one could perhaps spend a lifetime. When this meeting opened, the representative of the SFI said that we too had differences with Mahatma Gandhi. We have differences among ourselves. We have all kinds of differences. But we had no differences. The communist movement and the left movement and the socialist movement. We had no differences as far as the independence of India was concerned. We had no differences as far as communal unity was concerned. We had no differences on the issue of democracy. We had no differences on the issue of secularism. We were in it together. There was a difference between Mahatma Gandhi and us. By us I mean communists, because I have some claim to be associated with the communist movement as a sympathizer before 1947 in my school. We had no differences. We had a difference, and that was that communist movement commanded a very small support in the country. Mahatma Gandhi commanded the support of the majority in the country. And therefore, what he thought, what he did, mattered much more than what we thought and what we did. And therefore, we have much to learn from Mahatma Gandhi, and we have much to learn from his last period. As has been described in our program, his finest hour. We have much to learn. And that whatever I say now would be turned towards what we have to learn. First, to those of us who are not very familiar with the details of his life and the connected details of the national movement, I want to describe very briefly, to narrate the main events of his life. As most of you know, he was born in Gujarat in 1869 at Porbandar, small town. He became a barrister in London, and then he went to South Africa in 1893 as a representative of a Muslim Bohra firm in South Africa. It was from there that what was unique and innovative in Gandhi began. Before 1893, there were great leaders in India, great thinkers to whom we are beholden. Dadabhai Nauroji, the grand old man of the national movement, Ramesh Chandra Dutt, Gokhale, and others, who had told us what Britain was doing to India, how Britain had drawn tribute and impoverished India from 1757, how in the 19th century it had deindustrialized India, how the poor in India had been made poorer all the time by British rule. And that is why there should be constitutional development so that the Indian poor should be prevented from being exploited by Britain. They said all that, but they never themselves could go to the poor. Their contribution was great. They made us, the future generations, understand what the national movement was about, but they had no opening to the poor. Gandhi ji in South Africa achieved that opening. And that was a moment which was extremely significant in the Indian national movement. That event occurred not in India but in South Africa. After many trials and tribulations, about which there is no time now on which to dwell upon, in 1913 something happened. In 1913, 200 women engaged in defiant satyagraha in South Africa and were put into prison. Nothing like that had happened in India. Nothing. Then there was a march of 2,000 mine workers from Natal into Transvaal. Nothing like that had happened in India, including 50 women workers. That was unique. And the South African government surrendered. Gandhi's demands were moderate as always, but the act of surrender was most important. Demands could be won. And when therefore Gandhiji returned to India via England, leaving South Africa in 1914 and arriving in India in 1915, he soon began to try to organize the poor in the same way that he had done in South Africa. But this was a huge country. He was dealing with tens of millions of people, not just thousands. But then came in 1917 the Champaran Satyagraha. No peasant movement like that had ever happened in this country. The Khair Satyagraha, the Ahmedabad textile workers' strike of 1918, nothing like that had happened before. So the poor were being organized. I said we had differences with Gandhiji, but many uniting points. We also aimed to organize the poor, but he had been in that camp before us. He had been there decades before us. And we had to learn from how, for moderate demands, you could rouse the masses and win them. It is not enough just to have huge slogans, but to sit down and win the winnable things first. So, for the first time in the mass national movement, the door was open to the poor. One of Gandhiji's great critics and mentor and teacher of the communists of my generation, R.P. Dutt, admitted that only Gandhi had, unlike me, he used the word Gandhi. I can never speak of Gandhiji except as Mahatma Gandhi or in quick moments as Gandhiji. I could never call him Gandhi. My generation could never do that. So, that Gandhi could enter, he says, the huts of the poor, which no other national leader could enter. He uses the word bourgeois, no bourgeois leader could enter. We could not also enter at that time. There were thousands of things which stopped us: caste, religion, locality, whatnot. All kinds of superstitions and divisive notions haunted the Indian poor. They still haunt them today. But it was he who first broke them first. The second important thing that he introduced into the national movement was also often forgotten: the marriage of social reform with political agitation. The first was entry of the poor into the national movement. The second was social. This came slowly, painfully. In Hind Swaraj in 1909, he denied that India needed social reform, practically denied Indian social reform, never referred to untouchability, which he himself never followed in his farms or ashrams in South Africa. But he never mentioned the scourge of untouchability, never mentioned the suppression of women in Indian culture and civilization. But they now came to the fore. In the Indian National Congress, when formed in 1885, had said that it would not deal with social reform, that was not a political issue. But the Gandhian movement became not only a political movement, but a movement of social reform, what he called the constructive program. And therefore, he broke two taboos of Indian culture, which had never been broken before. The caste system, which as late as 1917 he had been defending, but he became its great destroyer. People often say the Indian people are religious, but they were not religious enough in the national movement. After all, the whole Dharma Shastra was abolished in India in 1955-56 with the Hindu Code. Whatever its limitations, it was a remarkable act. But if you look at its background, it goes back to the Karachi Resolution of 1931. Equality was promised to women there. And therefore, it became clear what Gandhi had just mentioned, perhaps incidentally in Hind Swaraj, that Indians, in order to be free, must deserve to be free. And what does deserve to be free mean? They should abolish, they should disregard the caste system, and they should give equality to women. These two very important principles were brought into the national movement not by socialists, not by communists, but by Mahatma Gandhi. He was there, he preceded us there, we only followed. Then you come to the religious issue. There was a time, and Gandhi was right there, when religious issue hardly divided the Indians. In 1828, when Ram Mohan Roy was pondering on why Indians were not patriotic, did not regard India as their nation, he thought of the caste system, that the caste system divides Indians. They don't regard themselves as Indians, they regard only their caste. He never thought of religion. To him, it did not seem, quite obviously, that religion divides. As a great landlord, he had Hindu wives as well as a Muslim wife whose child was brought up as a Muslim. So it was another kind of India. But by the time of Gandhiji, modern methods of propaganda had come in, printing press had come in fully, the language dispute, Hindi and Urdu, had come in, so India was divided. In 1909, as early as that, the Indian Councils Act first tested the waters of communal division. Not first, The Bengal partition had tested it, the English had tested these waters before, but this was the second major occasion where the communal waters were tested by British imperialism. What would be the response of the Indian national movement to superior concessions, to unjustifiable concessions given to Muslims in the Indian Councils Act? Double or even triple vote, and so forth. Reservations far beyond their population proportion. And lower criteria for voting. Many Congress leaders denounced these concessions. The one man who did not was Gandhi in South Africa. He said it is wrong to denounce, to criticize concessions to the Muslims. They are Indians, they are brothers of ours. If they get more concessions, why should we worry? Our brothers have got something. So as early as 1909, he raised his voice not against Muslim communalism, which was then quite strident, not against Muslim League, but against even those leaders who on very fair grounds were opposing the concessions granted to Muslims. So it was this kind of man. When he had formed earlier the Indian National Congress in South Africa, 90% of that body were Muslims. So, as far as he was concerned, and the way he immediately went into the Khilafat movement and declared non-cooperation first, not on Punjab wrongs, not on the item of Swaraj, but on the issue of Khilafat also, meant that he was one of those leaders who was the most sincere in trying to bring Hindus and Muslims together. We were told, and we have been often told, and in fact, unfortunately, R.P. Dutt made it an issue, that Gandhi alienated Muslims because he was a devout Hindu. But he was a Hindu of a special sort, first of all. I dispute this thing that a devout Hindu cannot be a leader of the national movement just for that reason, but let us forget that. He was a Hindu of a different sort. While calling himself Sanatani Hindu, he never prayed, he never followed Hindu ritual. He was very angry when Kasturba went to the great temple, Puri temple in Odisha, because he would not pray before an idol. He was a Hindu of a different sort, whose God was God of all people, and who regarded, and he said even in his last days, that to him Quran and Bible were as sacred as the Gita. So he was a Hindu of a different sort, who probably changed the whole character of Hinduism, recognized Hinduism. This is a different issue. I will not discuss, go into detail, but how Hinduism was seen pre-Gandhi and how it is seen post-Gandhi is a very important thing. He read modern values into Hinduism. And it is perhaps his perception of Hinduism that makes Hinduism, so far as it is possible, a lively religion. But that's another matter. The final matter is that why a devout Hindu cannot, who believes in communal amity, cannot be a leader of the national movement. Will it be raised against Abul Kalam Azad? Will it be raised against Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who was doubtless the leader of both Muslims and Hindus in the Northwest Frontier province, who always in open elections until until independence secured majority for the Congress in the Pathan homeland? Would it be raised against him that he was a devout Muslim? He was, and his idea of Islam, unlike that of Gandhiji, was not that kind of universal religion in which everyone could be accommodated, in which every religious text was as sacred as the other. So he did bring in secularism of a sort which would be rejected perhaps by absolute secularists who would say, and rightly, that secularism should have no concern with religion. That is the interpretation that secularism is given. But even with that difference, here was Gandhi, who had provided a platform where all communities could come together and where the foundations of a secular constitution could be laid. After all, as far as the Karachi resolution was concerned, drafted by Nehru but presented by Gandhiji himself, it was a totally secular document and demanded neutrality of the state in regard to all religions. These are the words that were used there. So by 47, Gandhiji had changed the face of India by changing the whole character and strength of the national movement, and by perhaps affecting the ideology of the Indian people in a manner which was totally unprecedented. Without saying so, without standing forth as a great philosopher, he had changed the ideas of a whole generation. So was it not enough for a career? Could he not sit down in 1947 and say, I had brought independence, and so that's the matter, now let others decide what to do for the country? It would have been a great career. But he decided otherwise. His responsibilities, he felt, began now. And that is why his last months are so important for us. Because we are actually in 2015 in the same situation that he was in 1947. Different sort, yes, different level, yes, but very much the same situation. When independence came, it came with partition. It's folly to say that Gandhiji was responsible for partition. He had opposed it. So far as human will and energy could come, he had tried to give all possible concessions to the Muslim League. All possible concessions. The history is there, I need not repeat it. Nobody asked Muslims in Madras, nobody from Congress, nobody else asked Muslims from Madras, Muslims from Bombay, Muslims from central provinces, Muslims from UP and Bihar, whose areas could never go to Pakistan to vote for Pakistan. They voted, or at least 85% of both those people eligible for vote voted in these areas for Pakistan. After that vote of 1947, Pakistan was inhabited. And to blame anyone else for partition is perhaps, as far as legal grounds go, absurd. You voted for division of the country. The division of the country has been conceded. But Gandhi doesn't blame Muslims. And it's a very important thing that he does. He blames them only partly. He blames also the Congress. If you read the collected works, there's a straight, as usually happened, he did not hide what he believed. He said in a prayer meeting, he says that Muslims are, of course, responsible. They decided for Pakistan, so that's true. But others are also responsible. Even Congress is responsible. How? Despite the fact of its declarations, despite the fact of its principles, declared principles, it's a caste Hindu party in practice. He concedes them. He uses the word caste Hindu, and it was so recognized by Muslims. A remarkable declaration by someone who did so much to build that party and to build the movement that it led. Despite its declarations, he said, Congress, after all, was a caste Hindu party. Who was responsible for making Congress a caste Hindu party? It is difficult to say. One could argue, if Muslims don't join the Congress, what fault is that of the Congress? It has done everything. But in any case, that was the reality. And he was conscious of that reality because, as we know, because as a university student in 1947, I knew, even as a first-year student, that large number of Congress leaders in those days were thinking like leaders of the Hindu Mahasabha. Not all, not perhaps even the majority, but a very large number of Congress leaders, from local to top. And top, it was suspected, headed by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. After all, he had said at a meeting of the AICC in Meerut that sword will be answered by sword. He had said that, and who will answer by sword? Of course, Hindus. And that statement had dogged him, and that statement had greatly worried, as we know, Gandhi. So Gandhiji might perhaps have all those things in mind when he made that statement. It was therefore, a very important position of Mahatma Gandhi that he did not lay the blame for partition on Muslims alone. He perhaps, I don't know, he divided the blame. He saw the situation as it had developed beyond his control, undoubtedly, but he drew some conclusions. And those conclusions were that it was his duty to protect those who were being slaughtered on both sides of the frontier. That was his primary duty. First, to prevent slaughter. Perry Anderson, who has written a book which has been published by some left-wing publishers in Delhi, The Indian Ideology, which in a review I called rather that it should be titled Indian Illusions, that Gandhi had, in fight against British imperialism, had actually anticipated a fight between Hindus and Muslims. Well, this is, of course, a wrong accusation. What Gandhiji had been saying was a reply to the British accusation that if we left the country, Hindus and Muslims would be at each other's throats. He had said that it would be better that they were each other's throats than being slaves of the British. That was not saying that he anticipated or welcomed such a result. And this is extremely unfair because in his last days, he was practically fully preoccupied with trying to prevent such a slaughter. I would like you to remember what we, of course, in 1948, who witnessed us, 47 and 48, witnessed us, would never forget that Gandhi was at Calcutta when Independence Day came. He refused to celebrate it. His major concern was, after Noakhali and Bihar, that there should be no riots in Calcutta. And the situation in Calcutta worsened because of incidents in East Bengal and a small, compared to what happened in the Punjab, a small stream of refugees began to stream into West Bengal. From 1st to 4th September, after some incidents of murders of Muslims had occurred in Calcutta, he went on fast. That was the first time public opinion was tested. Public opinion in West Bengal responded splendidly. And there were demonstrations in his support, and by 4th September, everyone assured him that nothing like this would happen. I do not want to go into the incidents which led to the fast, but the important thing was that there were such demonstrations, not only by congressmen, but also by communists and socialists and others, and by ex-Muslim leaders also, large Muslim crowds, assuring Gandhi of total peace, despite the fact that this time round only Muslims were victims of attacks by Hindu crowds. So he succeeded. But on 4th September, when he gave up his fast, the first slaughter occurred in Delhi. On 4th and 5th September, according to official figures, 1,000 Muslims were slaughtered in Delhi. The great slaughter that had started in the Punjab already by Independence Day now spread to Delhi. And therefore, Gandhiji rushed to Delhi and arrived here on 9 September. Now, I don't know how much time I've got, but I want to say a few words and then come back to Gandhi. I was, as I say, a student of the Aligarh Muslim University at that time. We used to get Hindustan Times. We lived near the morgue. The morgue became populous with Muslim corpses coming from areas near Haryana. There was a slaughter of Muslims at a place called Tappal within Aligarh district. There were slaughters, there was mass slaughter in Dehradun of Muslims in Dehradun and Mussoorie. It seemed that everything would engulf us. AMU would be a notable target. A regiment was sent by the government, the Kumaun regiment, although their number was small, but they did whatever they could. They had flares all going up in the sky in the night to see if there were any mobs coming to Aligarh. But it was obvious that if the slaughter came into western UP, there was nothing to stop them. There was a strong anti-Muslim feeling developing as refugees began to arrive. And therefore, it seemed, on the balance, that any time, anything could happen. Only one man seemed to stand between that danger and peace, and that was, of course, Gandhi. So Gandhiji became, for us, particularly for Muslims, and I, of course, was among them, that if we remained in India or remained alive, one man would be responsible for that. When Gandhi arrived in 9th September, he was insulted in both the refugee camps, refugees from Punjab, and he was insulted in Muslim camps, both. It was also again the quiet way in which we persisted in trying to help everyone that ultimately silenced the critics. If you read Gandhiji's words in the collected works, there is not a single complaint against the insults that been hurled against him by both Hindus and Muslims upon his arrival in Delhi. That's astonishing. Others were witness to it, but he did not think that this would affect his position. And that total unconcern with his own personal popularity or with his personal comfort or with his personal dignity is remarkable, really remarkable. Many things that happened you would never even guess at from his letters or from his prayer meetings. He went to Sambhal, where there was a danger of rioting. He went to Panipat earlier. He tried to persuade the 20,000 Muslims to stay, but failed. Within a month, their position, because of continuous arrival of refugees and the continuous exploitation of the situation by Hindu Mahasabha, RSS and the Akali volunteers, made that impossible. And Panipat was cleansed of Muslims. A similar ethnic cleansing was planned for Delhi, and now it became Gandhiji's principal task to stop that and therefore to stop the spread of communal violence and slaughter. Now here he doesn't mince his words, and he forced the AICC, the All India Congress Committee, despite clearly the advice of or the wishes of Sardar Patel and others, many Congress leaders. In November, the Congress specifically blamed the Muslim National Guard, the Rashtriya Sevak Singh, and this is important point to remember, November 1947, and the Akali volunteers for the violence. They pinpointed these three. And the draft was that of Mahatma Gandhi. He insisted that this should be done. Today, in our country, the army is sacrosanct. How many civilians it might shoot, you can't criticize the army. But Gandhi did not believe in such sanctity. He said the army should learn. The army should protect the citizens. He said the same thing to Pakistan. He didn't mince the words there. It's not that he was not trying, he was trying this, the accusation of Godse and others and the RSS Hindu Mahasabha that he was only appeasing the Muslims is wrong. He continuously also denounced what was happening in Punjab and Sindh and Bahawalpur, and was writing letters and sending messages to leaders in Pakistan to do something. But he said that my first task is here in India, and that when that is performed, then I will go to Pakistan. But so long as we are killing Muslims, we cannot say anything to Pakistan. That was his continuous thing. He said if Muslims have to leave India, then that would be the end of Hinduism and Sikhism. This is, again, a quote from his prayer meeting speeches. Ultimately, as you know, he went on a hunger strike. On 12th January, at a prayer meeting, without any advance notice, he announced that from the next day he was going on a hunger strike. I've read his statements in the prayer meetings. He never mentioned in the prayer meetings the 55 crores matter as a matter on which he was going on hunger strike. But it pained him that the government of India had not paid 55 crores to Pakistan, although there was an agreement between the two. And he felt that this was dishonorable. Although on Kashmir issue he supported the government of India's position, but he did not support the government of India's position on going back on its word the result of this was that salaries could not be paid in Pakistan in full, and there was no provision for paying for paying the salary in the next month unless Pakistan officers, Pakistan employees, unless the 55 crores were paid to Pakistan. So the Pakistan government was facing bankruptcy because of India going back on its agreement. That pained Gandhiji very much. And he let Pandit Nehru and Sardar Patel and perhaps Mountbatten know that was one of the two major conditions of his withdrawal of strike, that must be paid to Pakistan immediately. You can imagine how popular this position would be in India, where any concession to Pakistan was regarded as treason even by the Congress leaders. But the first thing was that not only should riots stop in Delhi, but that Muslims should be allowed to go back to their houses, such as were in the refugee camps, and mosques must be cleared of occupation by Hindus and Sikhs, all mosques and all religious places of Muslims. And those that had been burnt or destroyed, mosques and other religious places, dargahs and so on, must be repaired in full at government's cost. These were some of the demands which later on he dictated. He was in effect asking thousands of refugees who had occupied Muslim mosques and houses to go back to refugee camps. And how popular that demand could be, you can well appreciate. But Gandhi felt that however unpopular, whatever conscience calls for must be attempted. And conscience called for both things. That was what he said. His decision was greeted in Delhi by shouts of Gandhi Murdabad in all the lanes and by-lanes of Delhi. There was a very cold reception to his fast by a large number of Congress leaders, including Patel and Dr. Rajendra Prasad, then president of the Congress. He had replaced Acharya Kripalani. On the third day, Nehru and Patel went to Gandhiji, and while Nehru pro forma defended the cabinet decision not to pay to Pakistan, Sardar Patel became insistent. And so came the words which haunted Sardar Patel throughout the rest of his short life that was left to him, unfortunately. "You are not the Sardar I knew." That was how Gandhi responded. Gandhi had made clear in his prayer meeting speeches that while his respect for Sardar Patel continued, they differed. And this was now made clear. What is important for us is, however, what happened on the third day. 10,000 people turned up at the Red Fort to hear Jawaharlal Nehru pleading that peace should be restored so that Gandhiji should end his fast. Not a large figure by any means, and Delhi was a much smaller city at that time, but yet a figure of importance, because both Hindus and Muslims were present there, right in front of the old city. Something had happened. By the fifth day, the number had increased to 1 lakh. 100,000 people marched. Tongawalas, postal and telegraph employees, railwaymen's union, ordinary people. And let us remember then, communists and socialists all joined in that procession. There were red flags in the procession. We had no difference with Gandhi at that time. Who didn't join were the Hindu Mahasabha, the RSS, and a few Congress leaders whose numbers now began to diminish. There was an upsurge among the people as no one could have expected. Even in villages, people went to Delhi to join the 1 lakh procession from Aligarh, from Meerut, from Muzaffarnagar, now of ill fame. And then the government of India made the announcement on the 16th that it would pay rupees 55 crores to Pakistan. Sardar Patel withdrew, and the majority of the cabinet withdrew their opposition. There was no choice. And then a large number of people who had been named by Gandhiji signed on the signatures. There, I'm afraid the formal history is different, and what happened was different. The formal history tells you that Dr. Rajendra Prasad approached, at Gandhiji's insistence, the Hindu Mahasabha leaders and the RSS leaders to sign on the dotted line that they would not oppose the return of houses to Muslims, that they would not harbor any intentions against Muslims or encourage any attacks on Muslims, and they would protect Muslims. And that they signed it. The reality was that crowds went to their houses and forced them to sign. The RSS chief was practically brought hand and foot to Gandhiji's, to Birla House where Gandhiji was fasting, and made to stand up and say that he would protect, all RSS people would protect Muslims. They are not honorable men, they are not bound by that oath. So let us not expect them to be bound by the oath that RSS chief of Delhi gave to Mahatma Gandhi. But he did give. And that was how Gandhiji withdrew his fast. And after that, Delhi was one with Calcutta in the peace that followed. And what was expected also took place in Pakistan. The slaughter stopped. In fact, it had been noted, for instance, by the authors of Freedom at Midnight, that the initial response to Gandhiji's fast in Pakistan was far more favorable, as you might expect, than in India. Prayers were held for Gandhiji in Pakistan mosques. And Mia Iftakharuddin, the son of a famous landlord, financier of the Communist Party of India in Punjab in 40s, a Congress leader until 1946, when he joined the Muslim League, he also went on fast. And immediately after Gandhiji's fast was over, he came to Delhi especially to meet Gandhi. Gandhiji, by his fast, protected Muslims in India, ensured that India would be a secular country, at least until Mr. Modi and his followers make it otherwise. It would remain a secular country, but he also signed his death warrant. There is no doubt that the words that RSS and Hindu Mahasabha leaders were using before the fast, before their mouths were forcibly shut by people, they were calling for Gandhiji's life. You can see them. Golwalkar visited Delhi in December, and the reports of his speeches in close circles that appeared in Hindustan Times, crying for Gandhiji's killing. In effect, he is the only one blocking the transfer of disloyal Muslims to Pakistan. What did it mean that you remove that block? Savarkar was obviously involved in murder. It was a travesty of justice that he was acquitted for lack of evidence. If the government had appealed, one is sure that he would have been convicted. Until Mr. Noria pointed out the role of princes, I always wondered how these chaps who were saying money on Tongas had money enough to travel twice by air at that time. So there were financiers also. And that guilt of Hindu Mahasabha and RSS cannot be washed off. They now take pride in that guilt. And that, of course, redoubles the enormity of their crime. When Gandhiji died, there were demonstrations and rallies throughout the country. I want to recall the rallies because in a town like Aligarh, in the Indian Aligarh Muslim University, something like 20%, 1/5 were still Pakistanis who were completing their second year, fourth year, and sixth year. And there were refugees already. And I want to say something about the refugees. However, they are suffering in Aligarh. They did not touch a single Muslim house. They remained in their camps. And as far as Muslims were concerned, especially after Gandhiji's arrival in Delhi, they collected in the university and outside large amounts of clothing for the refugees, which they accepted with utmost friendship. So Gandhi made an appeal to ordinary people. And when he was killed, it seemed as if the whole university was going to the city. And we all went there. And there were large crowds. And among the slogans shouted were not only Gandhi ji Amar Rahe, but two slogans which those waving the red flag shouted, particularly the communists, but which were taken up by the entire gathering. गांधी जी के हत्यारों को फांसी दो, महासभा संघ वालों को फांसी दो. It was clear to everyone that Hindu Mahasabha Sangh means Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh were involved. It was not only the slogans popularized by the Communist Party, and it was in fact one of the first pro-communist demonstrations in which the communists were involved that I actually participated in. But it was the whole humanity. And one thing I should always also remember, which never enters into formal histories. On the evening of 30th January, sweets were distributed throughout the country, including my city, Aligarh, by Hindu Mahasabha and RSS leaders. Throughout the night, they were besieged by crowds, students particularly. And they were forced to eat the sweets that they were trying to distribute. And they were forced to apologize. And all of them pretended that somebody else's, so that their niece or nephew had got married, so they were distributing them. So the joke then was that somehow or the other, on the evening of December 13, the niece or nephew of every blessed Hindu Mahasabha leader and RSS got married. So this was the marriage day for the Mahasabha and RSS leaders. We could also make jokes about it. Now, I would try to end by saying that in all this, there was no difference between us communists and Mahatma Gandhi. We were in it together. And we also should have learned a lesson. Everyone, every communist, every political movement must learn a lesson. When everything is running in an opposite direction, when you are against the mainstream, but the mainstream is wrong, then you should say it is wrong. Don't make unprincipled concessions. After all, when the CPM and CPI separated, and many like me left CPI for CPM, we felt that in the national hysteria against China, we should not join. It did not mean that we were supporting every Chinese position. It meant that we should not join in the hysteria. And I think that was a correct decision. History has shown that that decision was correct. That decision, although we did not realize, was one of the kinds of things that Gandhi insisted upon. And that is something that we must learn. National hysterias. Everyone, if you had said before Gandhiji's fast, all Muslims being disloyal, they had voted for Pakistan, had they not let them leave the country, would have got applause. But when Gandhi said again and again, this is barbarism, and when he went for a fast, then even those Congress leaders who were trying to say the same thing as the Hindu Mahasabha and the RSS now turned around and followed Gandhi. So Gandhiji's finest hour, that these words have a great lesson for us. The second lesson, I think, is that the largest possible unity for a correct cause is called for. That we showed in January 1948, that the Indian people showed. And that is why, if communalism has to be opposed, if the nation has to be saved from short-sightedness and from communalism, and recognizing that communalism and communal chauvinism is today the major political weapon of the corporate sector, by which they have gained a government which 100% follows their will, then we should think seriously about how we can contribute to a national unity against the communal and corporate offensive. That we have to be that way. Gandhi had also shown us the way that if we can't agree on other things, let us agree on the main thing. And on that main thing, let us establish as large a unity, as broad a unity as possible to defeat the communal offensive. After all, in the best election that the BJP has got, as one, they have only got support from the 31% of the electorate. 69% did not support them. And therefore, if we can learn any lesson from Mahatma Gandhi, that lesson should be that we should stand up and create a unity that will make the Indian, that will repeat the events, in a sense, of what happened in January 1948. Thank you.